Welcome to Keep What You Earn, your judgment and jargon-free zone for entrepreneurs of all levels. Get ready to learn how to scale your business, save money in taxes, and create a business that grows your wealth. If it feels like the financial side of business is like eating your vegetables, well then think of this podcast as the ranch dressing to make the process a little more enjoyable. My name is Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CPA and business owner on a mission to simplify money and empower others through knowledge. I hope this episode inspires you to take action, but remember that the information we share is for educational purposes only and is not individual tax advice. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start the show. So fun fact, when I first started Financial Solutions, actually the origin of it was working with fitness professionals and specifically working with those who are entering the digital space honestly, around the time of COVID. Like I started my business about a year and a half before, and it just really took off during COVID. And I was helping serve fitness professionals because I myself was working as a fitness instructor. And while I was doing that, I came upon so many different people online. And one of them was today's guest, and Pat, who became a dear friend and colleague over the past few years. Pat was in a very similar niche, very similar industry, and we had a lot in common, sharing ideas back and forth and just ideating, brainstorming. And what I love about Pat is that he has the exact same passion I do for helping business owners, for helping them thrive, helping those who maybe don't have the educational background, don't have a leg up on others, and to infuse more knowledge and more awareness, more curiosity into their lives as business owners. So Pat is a CFP, which is a certified financial planner. He's an enrolled agent, which is the highest credential awarded by the IRS, by the way. Don't knock the enrolled agents. I know everyone says CPA, but an EA, I don't mean executive assistant, I mean enrolled agent. An EA is extremely highly regarded. It's a tax-focused credential, and it's absolutely invaluable. So Pat is a CFP primarily as a certified financial planner. And what he does, as he eloquently puts it, is he's the quarterback for your financial strategy as a business owner from all dimensions, not just your business, which is what the CFO would do, but from the standpoint of what to do with your wealth, what to do with your money once it exits that business bank account. What do you do once you actually take the money out of the business bank account and you're building wealth? Like you have the seeds to build wealth, but like, how do you grow it? How do you water it? Where do you plant it? That's the kind of stuff that he deals with. So today we're going to be discussing all sorts of things around retirement and investing strategies and saving. And I know you're going to gain a ton of perspective from today's episode to kind of motivate you to go out and start saving or just investing and being on a mission to build your own wealth. Let's hear from Pat. Hey, Pat, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's pretty cool. We've known each other a while. I'm glad we got a chance to do this.
I know. And Pat is one of my many friends I haven't met in person yet until this May. So I'm really excited about that. Pat, could you introduce yourself to everyone who's listening? Just let them know who you are and what you do.
Sure. So Pat Darby, I'm a certified financial planner. It's also an enrolled agent. I live here in Las Vegas, moved from New Jersey, mostly to save on taxes. So it's kind of weird living in Vegas, but the reason was taxes. So,
well, I'm sure the weather didn't hurt either.
I don't miss the winter, but this actually was I've only been here 3 years, but this was a cold winter relatively. It's much warmer than New Jersey's winter, but this was not a warm winter. But,
yeah,
I don't mind the heat. Like everyone obviously gets upset about the 110. I'll take 110 over 20 degrees.
I probably would too. What got you into like investing, financial advisory? Tell me a bit about, how you arrived at this career path.
So I don't want to say by accident, but I definitely pivoted completely. So I went to school. I was pre-med. I was a biochemistry major. So I was always good at science and math. But when I left college, I had like a 9-to-5 in medical sales, and I was going to reapply for medical school. And in the interim, I started a side hustle, which is like, as I'm getting older, it's kind of dumb now, but I was doing like beer pong tournament businesses so I was 23, 24 when I started that business, made all the mistakes. And that's what really started getting me interested. So I was starting to read like the E-Myth, all the, like the Rich Dad, Poor Dad, all the classic business books, trying to figure out why I suck so bad at business. And so that actually led me to, well, a couple of things. The economic downturn killed my business and was making what I was doing for a living in medical sales a real eye opener, in that as I was learning more about business and finance and taxes and what I didn't understand, I was also like seeing the ugly side of the business of healthcare. And so I was like, I want to go into the business of business. And that's when I had a lot of friends, because I was in North Jersey, New York City area, that were in finance. So I was like, what's this industry about? Not knowing at the time, when you ask someone like, hey, I want to go into finance, what should I do? They're like, that is a super vague question. Like, there's so much you could do in finance that like that is not a helpful way to ask it.
Yeah.
But that's what sent me down the path of going, like leaving my 9 to 5 in medical sales and going into finance to like learn more about the business of business. Unfortunately for me, I didn't have a really good track in terms of like mentorship. I started with like really small financial firms where they were really mostly like pitching their strategy. Like, this is what we do, like take it or leave it. Like, we're hammers, everyone's a nail. And it took me a while to really understand like what personal financial planning was and like why. But that's what started like going into finance, started pivoting into actual like helping people, like for example, anyone listening would know this, like if you're wealthy, you don't need someone to tell you that you're wealthy, like if you're making a lot of money. But there's things that keep you up at night, and that's not necessarily like your investment advisor is going to help you with, because like you might be freaking out over, how do I transition my business to my kids? And like that's like estate planning, and like your investment advisor is not going to help you with that.
Yeah,
they might just like tell you to like, you know, your portfolio could double or triple, but if it's not tax efficient or it's not estate efficient, then you're going to get a big loss at the end of the day with like the government. So like that's the kind of stuff that like it's more comprehensive that we weren't learning in those smaller firms. And that's when my career pivoted. And then from there pivoted one more time to small business owners. And when I started to dive deeper into the tax side of things was when it sort of like was the aha moment where I was like, this is what I needed when I was like 23, 24 years old, running a business with a 9 to 5, because I had a CPA at the time and I had a financial advisor, and they were both useless to me because they weren't business focused. And so that like financial advisors like pushing me into insurance products I didn't need and loading me up with retirement accounts that I need the cash flow in my business, and my CPA did nothing for my business other than I handed a bunch of receipts. So those mistakes in my early age really like carved off what I do now for people. It's like, that's what I wish I had when I knew nothing, like at this point, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's really about aligning the right professional with where you're at and what your goals are. And I think that what a lot of people struggle with is actually articulating what their goals are, because they, as opposed to being able to articulate their goals, they just know their discomfort. So like my goal is to do X, Y, and Z later. They're not thinking about that in the future. They're thinking about the pain points now, or they're thinking about what the struggle is right now, or they're waiting until after. In most cases, most people wait to get on the diet when their jeans don't fit, or they'll wait to, right? Like, so they'll wait to take action until they feel the palpable pain point. But when it comes to money, it's a really, really rocky road, because you're going, I don't want you to wait till you're broke to start investing, or to wait till you're, running out of money and you have no cash flow to now start proactively trying to save for retirement, or to, to come up with some type of wealth planning. So that is the tricky part, is usually the people who need the most help are not in the position to invest in it. So it's a science that we have to be proactive about. And I love that you identified that for you, it was, I needed to be the person that I needed, which is the approachable, understanding what people need when, instead of just saying, we deliver this product to you, and if you come in, we're just going to give you the same recipe over and over and over again, without any type of regard to where you're at and if you're ready for that.
And the other issue, exactly you're saying, is like the financial services industry as a whole has purposely pushed away the people that don't already have the money.
Right.
Like their commercials, I won't name the names, but like their commercials say like, once you get $500,000 in assets, then come talk to us, or $1 million in assets. Like their commercials say these things. So the person walking around with less than that, or worse, like negative money because they have debt and they don't know what they're doing, those people are being told, like, don't come to us. Find a way to make $1 million and save it, then come talk to us.
Yeah.
And it's like using like the fitness analogies. Like if you walked around and said, get a 6-pack, then hire a trainer, like that would make no sense in the fitness world. But that's what everyone does in finance. Like get money and then come talk to us. And more people would have money if they came and got the help along the way, especially young business owners, where there's more room for mistakes.
Yeah. And that's what we want to talk about today is we really want to unpack ways to approach retirement saving for business owners, not just from now this is not a podcast where Pat's going to talk about like, put your money here, go do this, go invest in this. We want to keep it tactical, but we also want to just get into like, what is the mentality, the mindset, the questions you should be asking yourself as a business owner who wants to save for retirement? Because I think it's just as important, the tactics of how to do it, as who do you need to be ready to save, and where do you need to be at to be ready to save, or how do you need to be approaching it? So I want to ask you, Pat, what are your tips on the first place to start if somebody is just now, maybe they're just curious from hearing this conversation, or they're curious and they've been saying, my business is growing, I'm not saving for retirement, and I know I should be. Where do I start?
So if you're ready to start saving, like I'll just assume in that scenario, like you have your emergency fund, because I do see people get excited to start investing and they're not prepared for like a financial emergency, which would be much more expensive than the ROI you're going to likely get on any investment. But assuming they're past that stage and they're literally ready to start investing, if you're going the retirement account route, again, it's one of the reasons I like to talk about the emergency fund first, because once the money goes in, you should mentally part with it for a few decades because it's expensive to pull it back out. But I would start looking at like the individual accounts, like either a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA, basically because they're free. Like as we're recording this in 2023, the limit you can put in is $6,500. So it's a great starter. And again, you can get these anywhere. Like we're not talking about an investment strategy. We're talking about a vehicle. So like a car, you can put anything in it. It's like going to be either pre-tax, post-tax, like meaning you pay the tax right now and you put the money in, then you never pay again, or you get a deduction and then you pay in retirement. So you get to talk to your tax advisor on which is better for you. But those vehicles are free. And again, what you decide to put in it is totally up to you and the person helping you with them. But that's a great way to start because there's no complexity to it and it's a low barrier to entry.
And I think a big step that people actually miss is they put their money in the Roth IRA or in their traditional IRA and they leave it there and they go, it's in the IRA. And I'm like, well, you have to put it in something. It shouldn't be in cash this whole time. In order for it to grow, you actually have to invest it. So there's a second step to that. So let's say they put their money in the IRA and now they're being told, what do I invest in? And of course, we cannot give advice on what to invest in. But what are some ways that someone who is intimidated by that question could then approach figuring that out for themselves?
So I'm glad the way you phrase that, because we talked about this briefly off air. Like I am very anti-Wall Street, mostly because I started there. Like I was working 120 Broadway right on Wall Street, and I see how self-serving that industry is. And even listening to like the big networks, and I'm not going to name any of them, but you know the ones that like they got the loud guy telling you the wrong picks all the time. Like they actually have like inverse ETFs on his advice now. But their advice, and I'm assuming your demographics got a lot of business owners.
Yep.
Those big networks, their advice is often tailored towards non-business owners, like the employee mindset. And as an example, because like, as we all know, and like the Hormozy made very famous, like invest in yourself. So like if you're working for somebody else and they're telling you put every penny you have into your retirement accounts or into the stock market, maybe that's not horrible advice for a 9-to-5er. But for you, the business owner, and you're like reinvesting in your team and more skills, more sales, more whatever, that might have a better ROI. But when it comes to actually investing with your Roth IRA or your traditional IRA, don't let Wall Street tell you all you can do is stocks and bonds, because that's not true at all. there's a thing called self-directing, and it gets a bad reputation because the people pushing that reputation are the ones that don't monetize it. But the answer to like what you should invest in is what you know the most about. Because if you stay in your lane and you invest in what you're an expert at, your ROI is going to be likely the highest and your risk is going to be the lowest because you're an expert. Like someone who's an expert in flipping commercial real estate, they're going to want to do that all day long. And for them, it's not high risk. For someone who knows nothing about commercial real estate, that's a highly risky investment. So, but you can do all of that when you self-direct. Like people will tell you like you can't, like when you go call you're like the big guys like the TD, the Schwabs and all those, like, and I work with TD, but you can't do self-directing there. That's not part of their menu. The best analogy I had was like, you can't walk into McDonald's and start ordering tacos. Like, can you eat tacos? Yes, but not at McDonald's.
Yeah.
And so for most people, I would say invest in what you thoroughly understand. And for those listening, if you're entrepreneurial, one of the reasons I like starting with like the Roth IRA and stuff like that is because as you get better and better at business, you're going to have opportunities come your way. And you might see an opportunity where like your friend's like, hey, I need 50K and I'll give you 20% of the business or whatever the case may be. You don't necessarily personally have to invest in that. Like if you started young and you have 50K in your Roth IRA, why can't that make the investment in the business that you know just needs X, Y, or Z? So that's for me, like to answer the question maybe in a roundabout way, like it doesn't have to be the traditional stuff that people tell you like invest in, because these retirement vehicles are very flexible. And for people who are business owners, like you like betting on yourself. You can bet on yourself with your retirement vehicle. You don't have to sit in like quote unquote cash.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of like money coaches, investment coaches, and influencers on Instagram, TikTok, and so on, who are always preaching the value of index funds, mutual funds, and these basic investment assets. Now, that, not to diminish that, I think that's a fantastic strategy and where I have a lot of my money personally, but here's why they do that, because those are some of the simplest things to understand. So if you are a brand new novice investor and what Pat just said was like, invest in what you're an expert in, and you're like, shit, I'm not an expert in anything. And you're really brand spanking new. That's where the underlying tone of a lot of this advice about index funds comes from, is that if you don't know anything about anything, or you feel like you don't confidently yet, then what I would say is then these are some of the lower risk or easier to understand items that you could probably invest in and not, not have to, you don't have to like do a ton of research on like options and puts and calls and all this crazy stuff in order to participate in the market if you don't know what to do. But I would say, and I'm sure you agree with this, get actively involved in learning something to become an expert in it so that you develop more confidence in some of these other asset classes, because you don't want to miss out on opportunities to grow.
On top of that, it's if you're running a business, the ROI is likely highest there. Like most of the wealthiest people on the planet, they did it through entrepreneurship. And so the complexity in your life for a business owner, like that's why you're listening to podcasts like Shannon's, like because there's so much complexity just on the tax side. That's just like the one side of your business. And so putting your stuff, like when you hear people say like just put it in an index or a mutual fund or whatever, it's also because like now get back to your business. Like that's going to do its thing. It's passive. Now get back to all the complexity that's in like your daily life. So I'm a big component on that too, is like keep some of your investing on your personal side simple, because the biggest ROI is likely your business, and also the biggest complexity is likely your business.
And technically more risk, even though it's what you know the most about and you have the most control over, there's still a ton of external factors. Like you said, it's the reason why we have an emergency fund, because COVID can happen and you could be a gym owner. So we have to make sure that we have the right safeguards in place so that we're not putting all the eggs in one basket either. I'm also a huge advocate for diversification as well, which I'm sure, I don't think I know a single financial professional who is like, nah, I'm a big fan of 100% of one asset class. Like, I just don't see that ever. I always see somebody, I always see preaching diversification. I think that's almost indisputable at this point, that, going all in on something is really rough when you're putting all your coins on one number on that roulette table.
Yeah. I mean, there's been too many examples. I mean, crypto over the last like 15 months or so. I mean, no one disputes that it's Well, some people do, but I mean, it's an asset class that a lot of people think is here to stay. But if you were 100% in, you're not feeling as good as you were about 2 years ago. So
Yeah. And when, Pat, do you recommend, so if business owners are listening to this and they're going, I haven't even thought about this stuff yet. Like I'm not there yet. I started a business, but I feel like I'm not making enough money yet to invest in retirement or to invest for future growth. One of my mentors, Chris Harder, he talks about this garden and saying you're planting these seeds, and when they grow, you can either harvest them or you can use the seeds to grow more plants. And I love that analogy for investing because a lot of people are harvesting. And they're using that for whatever they have going on. Buying a new home, yes, that's an investment, but spending cash flow on things to enjoy now versus the delayed gratification or the investing for the future or to build wealth in the future. When we look at business owners who are making a profit, what do you encourage people to do if they haven't thought about retirement savings or thought about this wealth building strategy yet? At what point in their journey do you start kind of going, hey, I really think you want to start thinking about this?
I think the habit is almost more important than anything because, and I took this way, I think it was even said in Profit First, that he encourages people, and I started doing the same thing with clients, that even if you have debt, start putting money into savings or investing. Like intuitively, that doesn't make any sense because like I should be all hands on deck to pay off this debt. But if you get in the habit of like putting $10, $100 a month away, it's the habit that's more important than anything, that when you do clear out whatever maybe the hurdles are, or you start making more profit, the habit's already there. And then when you start to allocate like a percentage, like you're like, okay, I can comfortably do 10%. And then you might move that to 15%. But you have like that foundational thing where it's like every time you get paid, you're mentally parting with a few dollars or percentage points, whatever it is that you're comfortable with. And it's going to like your future self. Because if you want to be financially free, like income and wealth are not the same. So if you can make $1 million, and if you spend $1 million, you're going to be on that rat reel forever.
I totally agree. And we're always in the pursuit of more income. But in reality, it's like, how are you using that income to then drive wealth that's a little bit more like, how are you building a foundation for your future where you won't have to worry about generating income after a certain point? And that's what a lot of people, I think it's difficult to grasp because we've been taught, like you said, it's the 9-to-5 mindset. We were taught to be good factory workers. Like we were taught to show up on time, make your money, save your money, go home and repeat until you're 65. And then hopefully, if you've been responsible, you've been saving enough of that income. And it's just that lather, rinse, repeat cycle. And I think that especially business owners, if you're listening, you are not like, that message wasn't for you. And that's the interesting thing is I think people are still adopting that mindset, but they're running businesses. But I go, that doesn't apply to you as much anymore, or you need to shift that type of behavior, what you've been told is the right way to do it, if you're trying to build your wealth through a business.
Not to mention back then, they did the hard work for you because usually they would do like a pension and things like that because people would basically work, retire, and die. So it wasn't that big of a financial burden on them to guarantee that retirement for you. Now, with people living longer, like obviously that part's a good thing, but it's forced those companies to stop providing retirement for you. So it's all on you. And that actually, if you do it right, it's better. But most people, if they don't do it right, it's way worse because then you're just going to have to work in perpetuity because you don't have a pension that someone guaranteed for you.
Totally.
So it's even more important now.
Yeah. And it's the hardest part too is that as business owners, we have to take control of our own future, our own retirement. I mean, hell, our own taxes. We talk about this too. Like you are now, no one is like doing this for you. Like mom and dad are not calling to make your haircut appointments for you anymore. Like where you are on your own, you're in college trying to figure out how to do your laundry and do all your stuff on your own. And as a business owner, you're going to get uncomfortable and you're going to have to learn some of these things in order to contribute to building your own wealth. But we get into asking for help. So we were talking about this a little bit too when we were chatting before, but the professionals And we were talking, Pat and I were having a conversation that was not directly related to this, but it was about like who you need when in your life cycle of wealth building, because there are people who will approach an investment advisor and ask different questions than like, and by the way, everyone asks me questions as a CPA. Like those three letters on my name somehow make me the oracle of anything having to do with numbers. And I'm like, okay, I went to school for 4 years, guys, the same 4 years as you. Like there's only so much we can learn, which I appreciate everyone's questions, but like, oh my gosh, some of them I'm just like, I have no idea. And Pat, can you just unpack for us from a financial advisory side of things? Because this is something I actually don't know a lot about. I do the numbers. Once the money leaves the business account, I don't know what's going on with it, but that's where you come in. So could you just kind of unpack what professional makes sense in your life at what time, or what they do for you?
So if you're talking about like once the money hits your personal bank account, like who do you need to talk to?
Yeah.
My answer would be you want to find a very comprehensive and independent person who's going to tell you, because you want to know how to invest those dollars. And you don't want somebody, this is my opinion, you don't want somebody who the person you're asking has only one solution. So the challenge you're going to run into, and this is how you do like your due diligence, is like, who does that person work for and what do they offer? Because I don't know what happened 6 months ago, but I went from getting a few questions about those cash value index life insurance policies to getting like 3 or 4 a week. So I'm like, I don't know what sales and marketing happened with all those companies, but they're doing great at it. But if you talk to someone who that's all they do is they have their insurance licenses, and you say, what should I do with my money? Like, you already know whether it's, I'm not saying it's not right for you, but I'm saying like, you know, the answer you're going to get. Same thing if you walk into some of the big financial firms and all they offer are like the typical portfolios that you think they offer. That's what you're going to end up with. You walk into a real estate firm and say, hey, where should I invest my money? You know what you're getting. So I would look for somebody who's working in a more consultative capacity where like, and I'm not to toot my own horn, but that's what we do, because I don't care how you invest your money. You pay me a monthly fee to help you usher the money where you need it. So that's the main thing. And you need to figure out where you want, like from your own perspective, regardless of your knowledge, you want to figure out what is right for you in terms of time commitment. Because I am not a real estate expert, but everybody knows you don't just set it and forget it with real estate. There's a little bit of work there. It's not like quote unquote mailbox money. Now, obviously you can outsource and things like that, but if you have no interest in being a landlord, well then maybe don't hire someone who's an expert in real estate and try to get you to do real estate. So that's my main thing. I would also make sure that the person's a fiduciary. So that's a confusing term that even people in the industry, including myself, I don't do a great job of differentiating it, but there's something called suitability and a fiduciary standard. And they're very similar on paper, but there's a very big difference for you, the investor. Suitability basically means it has to be right. It has to be something that you can tolerate. And fiduciary is the highest standard. It has to be in your best interest. So the best example I can give somebody is if you're worth $10 million and I try to pitch you some penny stock that I only want 100 grand from you, suitability wise, you could pass the test, because if that 100 grand turned to zero, you're fine. Like your life isn't really changed. But from a fiduciary standpoint, if you've told me like I like conservative stuff, then I broke the fiduciary rules by putting you into a penny stock, even though on paper you're suitable. So find someone who's a fiduciary, because they are actually legally required to do what's in your best interest, not their own best interest. But again, you want to find the independent firms. And again, I feel like I keep knocking on the big guys, but there's a rule at the big firms called selling away, meaning it's actually against their employment contract to tell you, like if you came into them and you've got a $2 million portfolio and you're like, me and my spouse found this amazing property that we want to invest in. It's going to cost $1 million, so we're going to have to pull that from you. It's against their employment contract for them to help you find a way to take half the assets and sell them away. So you have to be aware, again, there's super ethical people at those firms, but they do have those conflicts of interest. everyone's going to have a conflict of interest. Like it's impossible to have zero conflict of interest, but those are the ones that are like the big red flags that you should look for, is like someone who's going to be on your team and has very few conflicts of telling you like, don't do stocks, do real estate or crypto or whatever, because oftentimes you're walking in the door of someone who's only got one of the solutions for you.
Totally agree. And so for someone who is looking for this type of person, this is like the biggest conundrum. And I think both of our industries do a terrible job at this. But what the hell is the label for that person? What are they Googling?
Like an independent certified financial planner. See, like there's a group that has a lot of those types of people. And I'm not going to use their name because the one thing is like they're anti-insurance. You actually can't be in their club if you have your insurance licenses, which I hold mine because I've done a lot of health insurance. So I could make an argument all day that like they can't navigate Obamacare and all these health benefits for like young business owners who don't have much profit yet because they're not allowed to have insurance licenses. So to turn your back on insurance because it is demonized because it's predatory by a lot of people, but like it's a legitimate asset class for people that need, and it's a legitimate risk like prevention strategy. So even them, like they're doing their best to be conflict of interest free, but they have that one too. Like if you go on the CFP website, like Certified Financial Planner, and again, you don't need to have your CFP, but that is an organization that holds a standard higher than the regulators. So maybe that's comforting. I mean, I don't know, but I'm biased because I have the designation and they charge us an annual fee to keep it and all the CEs and all that. But you're going to find people like you can look up by zip code. And also on that website, it does like you can find people who specialize in business or specialize in, if you're looking for maybe your parents, like someone who specializes in Social Security. And so you can find, and then you can just start talking to them and figure out like where they work. Because again, I do feel like I'm bashing the big guys because I do have a lot of things I don't like. But if you want a big name and know that, hey, like this person's got a team and they're at this big name and that's something you like, maybe your parents are with that big name so you feel comfortable, that's cool too. But I would start there, something like that where you can find people who are going to work maybe in more consultative capacity for you.
Yeah, I think it's also there's the big name versus the small independent. I think it's kind of like banks. It's kind of like my accounting firm. Like I look back and go, you know, the big firms, the big companies, they're great because they also have infrastructure and process and a way to manage you and communicate with you that's pretty standard. I think there are pluses and minuses to both, but I think that it depends on what you value. So what I would probably do is start with, I do this with my business owners when it comes to their bank. And I go, well, what do you value in a banking relationship? Like, do you just need to know your money's still there? Or do you actually want to show up at the branch and talk to Susan behind the desk and like have them know your name? Like, does that matter to you? And that is the difference though, is how much does it matter in terms of personal touch, customization? How involved do you want to be? How do you prefer to be communicated with? Ask yourself these types of questions, because I think that you make a really good point with I love the independent, especially when you want that individualized attention and to be educated. Cause I feel like they'll take more time to do that, but it comes down to the person, how they approach it and, you know, your values as an investor.
I would also confirm that they can give tax advice because a lot of the big firms, and I totally understand it because the big firms, often they're not allowed to give tax advice. And the only reason is just for their liability. They have thousands of people around the country working for them. And they would have one person who hasn't taken a tax class in their whole life and another person who could be like a seasoned CPA. And they're both out there doing their thing. So they just have to be like, don't do it because one of you is going to get us sued. So, and you want that because there's advisors that I'm friends with that they can't go over like Roth conversion strategies, like all the stuff your CPA wants you to do. They can't even talk about it and recommend it and help you with it. So I would ask at least that question is like, can they give you that tax advice? Because you want them to be very good friends with your CPA because there's a ton of things that you guys are doing together.
And can you just, so I can say it all day, but I kind of want you to do it for me, is can you tell everybody why like you don't just go to your CPA and ask about investing questions?
Trying to think the best way to look at it. Mostly because they don't do it all day long. And this is the one challenge that I have with a lot of my client CPAs is that, and you probably know way more CPAs than I do. A lot of times CPAs get obsessed with saving you taxes today, and they're not necessarily looking at what your tax situation is going to be over your lifetime. So I butt heads a lot of times because I'm trying to like do these strategies where it's like, yeah, they had a bad year in their business. So why are we doing like a deduction on their 401k? Like we should be using the Roth side and taking advantage of this so we can have more tax-free retirement dollars. And it's like more strategic. A lot of times CPAs are so in the weeds with like tax season that they don't have time to be like, oh yeah, let's talk about 20 years from now what your tax situation will be like, and sort of integrating those things. So since financial planners are more in the business of looking at not just the vehicle, but what you're going to do with it, what the return on the investment should be, it's more appropriate to ask them. A lot of times the CPAs, they're like, yeah, this is the vehicle, but that's where we stop. And so not knowing where all the different money pieces together, like I'll give you an example. I had a client the other day message me on like some pre-IPO thing. And I don't even specifically know this company. I used to do pre-IPO. Like I remember, I'm older than probably a lot of your audience, but I remember calling people and telling them about this company, and they're like, Facebook. I think my daughter's friend works there. Like trying to explain people in like, I think it's 2012. Like we were selling Facebook before they went public. And like, obviously back then people were like, what the hell is Facebook? But so that pre-IPO game is still going on. And I had a client that asked me about it. And so long story short, we're talking and I was like, well, what are you doing this with? Do you have the cash? He's like, yes. And I'm like, well, don't like this thing. What's the ROI going to be? He's like, oh, it should be huge, like whatever, to the moon type of thing. And I was like, well, then do it in your Roth IRA. He goes, well, I don't have one right now, like that I can use the funds to. I'm like, well, your wife she only has a Roth IRA. So you're going to make 2 contributions for her and then make that investment. And like maybe a CPA would have that information, but we're looking at the investment side married to the tax side. Yeah. And so like it pivoted the conversation from should I do the investment to like, well, if you think this thing's a grand slam, it's not yes or no, but how? Like just like with real estate, it's location, location, location. Cause like all those crypto people that bought it in like a traditional IRA versus a Roth IRA, if they were early to the game, totally different tax liabilities.
Right.
Like, so that little step, and I did that for clients this year, like we were using a lot of self-directing to get people to, in the dip, like take your crypto, lock in the loss, roll it into your 401k and buy crypto again in the Roth side. So it's like you're getting 2 strategies, and like a CPA might not be looking at that big of the picture to be able to give you that advice. That's why they really work together, because we do all this and then I keep all the notes and then it goes to CPA. It's like, now make sure the IRS knows what we did too and document it properly.
Yeah. The analogy I use, I love the fitness and health analogies because I feel like financial health is what this is. And I say, it's like asking your dermatologist to fix your broken leg. I go, they are both a doctor. They went to medical school, but they have different specialties and different expertise. And I'm like, for all I know, you may have an amazing dermatologist who actually knows how to do that because they did the research, but like, that's not an expectation of the profession that they're in. And that's how I compare it when folks are asking me like, okay, great, what should I invest in? And I go, okay, now you're asking the dermatologist to fix your broken leg. We got to call another doctor for that. And that's why doctors have referrals, and they'll say, hey, I know a guy or I know a gal who can do this type of thing for you. But that's what we do in the financial realm as well, guys, is there are so many specialties. There are so many different ways to help you achieve your goals. But the key thing is, what is the goal? And you just hit on it where like most CPAs, the assumed goal or the reason why they hire a CPA is I want to save in taxes. So I'm going to get a CPA. And they're in that lens going, how do I save them in taxes, save them in taxes, save them in taxes? But they're not asking the next question of like, well, what's the overall goal here? And where are you trying to be 20 years from now? They're not asking those questions. They're trying to be, where do you want to be in April? And they're very, very short-sighted, most of them. I'm not knocking CPAs either, but most of the time what they're being hired to do is exactly that. So
they're going to be focused on delivering that outcome for the client because their service is not a forward-looking, future-looking service. And I think that's where people get caught up, is that, oh, they're smart, they know numbers, I can ask them. And you can ask them. But I think that they're not in the position to deliver that for you. It's like, just because they can cook the dish doesn't mean that they serve it on the menu and that you should be asking them for it. You want to go to someone who's doing that all day, every day.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, because everything that a financial planner does is future focused.
Right.
Like we're like making stuff up, like trying to figure out what your expenses are going to be in 35 years. Like obviously we're completely guessing, but that's just the mentality. Every time there's a question, it's like, okay, what are the ramifications in 1, 5, 10, 30 years? So it is different because, again, a lot of the tax professionals, their skill set is being extremely good at looking at the last 12 months, for example, versus, so like you're basically getting them to do, you're asking them to do something that they don't necessarily do, which is obviously why, like in your services, like, it's separate when you're looking forward as their CFO versus recording history. It's like two separate services.
Absolutely. But you need both to succeed in my mind. So I think
Sure.
it's not like, oh, well, my CPA is back looking. I don't need that. I need forward looking. Well, how do you look forward if you don't know where you've been?
Yeah.
And the first question Pat will ask you is like, show me your numbers. And that's where the CPA comes. I think when you have a team of professionals who can not only, I mean, if they can work together, it's even better. But if you can integrate your financial strategy with the right professionals in the right places, you become unstoppable at building wealth.
And that's one of the reasons that I had so many challenges when I was brand new, is because that delineation of like right when the profit falls out of your business and then it starts your personal financial journey. And obviously I'm a big advocate on growing both, because most people listening, like, it'd be amazing if we sold our businesses, but statistically speaking, 80% of us are never going to. And the 20 that do, I forget what percentage of that 20 are actually happy with the number they get. Like at most, even of those that sell, like of the 1 in 5 that sell, I forget what percentage, but I think it's over 50%, sell at a significantly lower number than they were expecting. So building those personal assets is critical as a hedge to the fact that most of us will never sell our business. We're all going to exit our business, but we're not all going to sell it. And so, but the problem I think most people run into, and I definitely ran into this, was that once that money drops out of the business, let's say it's not enough. Like, let's say $1,000 a month is dropping out, and you've got these lofty goals with college for your kids and buying this financial freedom lifestyle. And so your financial advisor is saying, well, this number needs to be $5,000 a month, not $1,000 a month. If your team isn't talking together, that's extremely difficult, because now you got to go back to your CPA and your CFO and be like, hey, I need 5,000 here. I have 1. And so there's so many questions. And it's like, is that a tax expert? So you're now walking back up to the revenue number. And I think that's very difficult if your team isn't all talking. Like even the financial person, like they're critical because they could be completely working against your accountant and your CFO because they're pushing all the money towards XYZ retirement account, and you're trying to like hire and scale. And so it's like, those are two totally different things. So you better get your team talking to each other, or you're going to have to make all those decisions. And it's going to be hard because you're going to have smart people giving you good advice, and neither advice is wrong. It's just maybe not, one of them is not necessarily what you want.
Yeah.
And so it's really helpful to have that all on the same page. That's why I like that team approach.
Yeah, I truly believe that if you have professionals serving you in different capacities that aren't on the same page with your goals, it can be like walking up an escalator that's going down, because you're going to be pulled in different directions consistently, and you're not going to be going anywhere. So it's going to be, well, why don't I have the cash flow for this? Well, because you told your financial planner that your main goal was to max out your retirement savings. So now you can't afford X, Y, and Z. Like, there are choices to be made and priorities to establish. But if those priorities are not understood by your professionals, and they're not the same priorities you're communicating, which also is a problem, because if you, I have seen this happen so many times, guys, where you'll go to, and there's nothing wrong with this because this is just human nature, but you go to the financial planner who's like, yeah, let's talk retirement. And you get so excited about retirement savings. And then you go talk to your CFO and you're like, yeah, let's invest in the next mastermind, the coach, whatever. And it's like, you said yes to both of these things. And we have enough money to say yes to one of them. Which one is it? And it is a really tough struggle. But when you're in that environment with that professional, you're like, you don't think about the other stuff, and then you're playing this tug of war with your priorities. And I think that when you can sync up and realize that these people need to talk to each other, you need to be on the same page. The most successful clients I have, and I'm sure the same with you, is when like the Pat and the Shannon talk to each other. And it's like,
100%.
how can we ensure the most success for this client? And I actually have a financial advisor I work with on a client, and she will call me and say, hey, Shan, I'm thinking of putting this much in an HSA. We're going to do this in the Roth, and we're going to do this. And this is the best part. And here's the reason why. And I go, okay, that aligns with everything I'm talking about with the client. So now I go back and say, how do I create cash flow for this client in excess of what she's already distributing, so that we can do this without harming any lifestyle preferences here. So like we are all totally in sync. And that is like the magic recipe for me is to ensure the most success for people is to have everybody on the same page.
Yeah. And especially because the language of like tax and finance isn't necessarily the language that a lot of entrepreneurs speak. So you're creating a lot of time commitment on yourself if you have to translate Shannon's idea to Pat and Pat's idea to Shannon. And if they don't understand it because of the miscommunication, or they just don't like the idea and there needs to be some discussion, like you have to do all that. And a lot gets lost in translation, or you just get frustrated and you're like, I don't know, one of you decide, like it puts
I don't know. You guys talk to each other, figure it out. But what's so funny is we're both serving you. So like, what do you want? And it's like the most high pressure question for a business owner is like, I don't know what I want. So that's really where, to tie this kind of together, is working with folks who can help you unlock that and define it for yourself so that you can articulate the goals and you have clarity. Because when you have the clarity on your goals, now the execution becomes easier for your entire team, including yourself.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's nice is if you, like we talked about it briefly, like the retirement accounts, like depending on where your financial planner works, a lot of the solutions come back to your tax and CFO, because you're like, well, we can do what we were just talking about, but you can't do it in your personal life. You have to do it in your business. And this is how. And now your CFO is back in the mix, running, like talking about your salary and things like that, because the strategy for your personal investments is actually going to live inside of your business.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just, I can't emphasize enough the importance of engaging with your professional, making sure they're on the same page as you, making sure that you guys are all connected and that everyone's on the same page with regard to your goals. So Pat, what advice do you have when people are looking to get involved, to educate themselves, to hire someone? Let's talk about what you and your firm offer and how you can help business owners right now.
So it just got separated. The company used to be Darby Business Advisors. Literally as of, I think, Tuesday of this week. It's Darby Wealth Planning that does all the things that are personal financial planning. And then Sin City CFO, I'm here in Vegas, does the tax advisory work, the bookkeeping, and all the virtual CFO work. And again, I purposely have me as the quarterback of that whole process for exactly what we described, because there's so much in translation and we outsource a lot of things. Again, like we're big fans of the team approach, but that's, again, we work with a lot of online entrepreneurs, a lot of people in the online fitness space, but we do everything that we talk about in this podcast. Like we help bridge that gap or link up with their current professionals. So no one needs to get fired for us to get hired. And we just come on the team. And typically we're like the quarterback of the team doing what we just talked about, where we're helping people say like, this is a strategy. Here's the notes, help us implement it, help us tell the IRS, help us do the bookkeeping properly for this strategy and this strategy. And then at the end of the day, when all that's said and done, the money that can roll into their personal finances gets taken care of. We can invest it for you, and then you get back to growing your business.
Love it. And where can folks find you on social media? I'm not sure if you mentioned that yet.
Yeah, social media, I'm most active on Instagram. It's at the Pat Darby. Same on TikTok. I'm just not as active on there. I need to still figure out how to get good at TikTok. But most
you'll figure it out.
Instagram.
Yeah, check out his financial advice amidst gym trips all the time. So
Yeah,
I love it. It's super
usually a gym.
approachable, and it's like, yeah, let me get a few arm sets in and drop some financial advice. But I absolutely love it. Pat, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
I can't believe how many episodes we've released of Keep What You Earn. There are literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in tax savings contained in our episode library. And there are so many topics that we cover. To make it easier to find more of what you need right now, we actually created a custom curated playlist just for you. That's right, a playlist of value-packed episodes that you're looking for based on your goals right now in your business. Whether you're making your first sale, trying to strategize your taxes, or you're scaling your team, there is something here for everyone. Check out the podcast playlist generator now using the link in the show notes and explore your custom playlist. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your podcast platform. This small action goes a long way for podcasters to get our message heard by more business owners just like you. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to information about our guests and ways to get in touch with me. We'll see you on the next episode.